Hi folks, welcome back. Thank you for watching. Please do hit subscribe if you haven't done so yet. It really does help when you do that. So today folks, welcome to the end of month Q&A video for May 2023. Now it's been a slightly quieter month this month. I think we're starting to get into YouTube's traditional summer lull. So I've put out a few less videos, there's been a few less comments coming in, but I didn't want to leave you without a Q&A video. So it's probably going to be a slightly shorter one today, but there's still a good amount of your comments to get through. So let's see who is first up this month. Bandit Sharp. Hi Joe, really enjoyed the Q&A this month. Great to see you're back with us. I completely get where you're coming from with prioritising your life. Not easy by any means. I was always in the fortunate position where no matter how stressful life got, playing my guitars and twiddling with pedals was my release. Got me through many a dark day, I can tell thee. Sadly for me though, playing guitar has recently become a major problem. A couple of smashed knuckles from installing log burners has made every pluck and twiddle a real pain in the ass. Well, fingers anyway. Maybe the odd arthritic finger joint starting to creep in after a lifetime of hard labour as well. Just imagine how that must feel. Now, the only release for me is I'm a celebrity, get me out of here on the bloody telly. Joking aside though, I know some folk are a lot worse off than me, but not being able to enjoy my guitar and related OCD and gas on 3 times daily basis is literally driving me up the wall. It is genuinely a serious threat to my mental health and well-being. I'm sure others must feel the same way. Any ideas for coping strategies, Joe? Wow, I mean, a lot there. Firstly, very sorry to hear about your fingers. Like, it's often been a worry of mine that, like you, playing guitar really does help with mental health struggles. Now, I've got a lot of them. I've been very open about that for many, many years now. And yeah, playing guitar is a real release for me. It's a real distraction technique. So if I were ever not to be able to play guitar, I think I would struggle with that, as you've certainly been finding as well. I think in your circumstances, without knowing the full ins and outs of everything, I'm guessing from what you say, you can play guitar maybe a little bit with your fingers, maybe like a lower string gauge or something like that, just to make it as easy as possible. Hopefully I'm not misreading the situation too much there. Failing that, I also get a lot of pleasure out of mixing music and kind of just getting my skills better on that. And that's something that can nowadays be done entirely on a computer. So it's not playing guitar as such, but it's still creative with audio, sitting down and balancing things out and getting a recorded guitar sound to sound as good as it possibly can by adding effects and EQ and things. So the similar things that you were doing with playing and twiddling pedals, you could perhaps do kind of in the box on the computer for a slightly similar result. It's obviously not the same, but I mean, that's about all I've got in terms of coping strategies. But yeah, very sorry to hear about fingers. It's, yeah, it must be really, really tough not being able to play guitar when it's something that's so important to you. And hopefully there'll be a way to become slightly more fulfilled with music with the fingers. But yeah, sorry to hear about the sore hands. Enrico Palazzo. As someone who struggles with mental health frequently, I can totally understand you, Joe, and I see you happier / more relaxed in this video than the last few months, and that is great. Happier, more relaxed is maybe a little too far, but baby steps in that direction for sure. Thanks for answering my questions, Joe. Always nice to see my names come up on video. It pleases my ego. Well, I think there's another question from you coming up today, Enrico, so you've got twice in one video yet again. Joe, I've always used amps from 5 to 20 watts, and the volume wasn't an issue for my ears. Now I own a 59 Bassman, which is 45 watts, and incredibly high volume, and my ears are starting to slightly suffer, especially when I use some old school fuzzers. The Jordan Boss Tone has got a ton of volume. My question is, do you use ear protections when playing your 30 to 50 watt amps? Have you ever looked at those amp shields that Joe Bonamassa uses? I really like my Bassman, but I'm a bit scared of damaging my ears, so I want to know if you have any tips since you've been using high wattage amps for a while. Occasionally I use hearing protection. I've got some of those little like gummy earplugs. I think they're meant for swimming actually, and you can kind of split them in half and roll them up and stick them in your ears and completely kind of create an airtight seal. So they're really effective. They're great for sleeping too, as it turns out. I don't use them often because for me, when you use something like that and you're playing guitar in a room, all you hear is low end. And for me, hearing the clarity and the articulation and the definition is really important to actually being able to demo an amp or a pedal or a guitar or whatever. And if all you can hear is low end, you're not really going to play the piece of gear in the best possible way. So I don't like using hearing protection. Two things that come to mind. Firstly, use some sort of attenuator. I've got the Dr. Z brake light, which I think works up to 45 watt amps. There's I think it's the speed brake is the full 100 watt version. So if you're cranking up the basement, it kind of sits in between the output of your amp and the speaker, and it just kind of attenuates the volume down whilst keeping the overall sound of the cranked output stage of your amp pretty much the same. So I don't tend to use that in demos, but especially if I'm just playing here and I'm using a non-master volume amp and I want some distortion, I can crank the amp up to the point where it's screaming loud and then just take the top end off a little bit. The more you attenuate, the more rubbish things tend to sound, but just knocking a few dBs off the top end, your ears will certainly thank you for that. The other thing that's really been great for me in a small room with loud amps is I used to have the amp I was playing through right next to me. So just off the camera shot that you're looking at now, if that's the end of the shot, the amp is kind of here. So I had like a Celestion Alnico Gold, for example, and a Dr. Z Z-Rec, which is a 30 watt amp, blasting me straight into my left ear from about 30 centimeters away. And yeah, that was very, very painful. And unfortunately, I haven't really got much, if any, hearing loss, but I can definitely tell that my left ear is a little bit more dull sounding than the right. And I think that's from having probably the Dr. Z Z-Rec, which is right here next to me, blasting me directly straight down my eardrum for so many years. Now, what has really helped with that is I started about 3-4 years ago using a 2x12 cabinet, and it's quite rare nowadays that I use a combo amp and use the speaker in the amp. Even with something like the Z-Rec, I tend to run it into the 2x12 combo and use the combo amp like a head. Now, the 2x12 cabinet sits behind me over there, so I can mic it up, and yes, of course, it's really loud in the room because there's no getting away from that, but the speakers aren't firing straight down my eardrum, they're firing over there somewhere. So I can still hear the top end, but it's not that kind of cymbally high end that's really going to hurt your ears. It's still there coming out of the cabinet, but it's getting fired into a wall over there. It's not going straight down my ear. So just taking your amp and kind of angling it away from you can really save your ears in a small space when it's really loud. It's not always the best for hearing yourself on stage, for example. You still probably need good monitoring for that. But if you're playing at home at volume or doing demo work or whatever, you want the amp to be loud. It tends to record better and sound really pleasing, and in a room having the amp loud and getting feedback is really good fun. But just not having the speaker aiming down your eardrum can be absolutely wonderful for that. So those are my two tips. Attenuate if you need to, and just don't point the amp at your own head. It tends to work out better that way for your ears. A Rush 1984. Hi Joe, when you did your speaker comparison videos, what speaker did you think sounded the best with the Fein A60 in a 2x12 cab? I've just picked up an A60 for my Vox AC30 and am deciding between getting a second A60, an A30, Celestion Gold, or something else. Interested to hear your thoughts. Now, two things I would say here. Firstly, the A30, I think that the A60 has always been one of my absolute favourite speakers. The A30 has trumped that. It is a wonderful sounding speaker. So the A60 and the A30 do sound wonderful together. The slightly lower wattage A30, it does have a little bit more of that kind of bitey upper mid-range. It's arguably a little bit more Celestion sounding. Don't tell Fein that. But the two together, the sort of the warmth and the fatness of the A60 and that extra bite and tightness of the A30, they just work really well together. But that said, I think my favourite speaker combinations, plural, are when I've mixed a Celestion with a Fein. The mid-ranges of both companies tend to be quite different, but they just slot together perfectly. So I, in that situation, in an ACE30, would probably pair the A60 with something like the Alnico Gold or maybe even the Alnico Blue, because the wattage will work out right there. Fein and Celestion, two iconic British companies. They have a different philosophy, especially in the mid-range, but they just sound godly when you run them together in a 2x12. So yeah, I would personally pair the A60 with some sort of Celestion Alnico, blue or gold. The Ruby is a very different thing. It's got no top end on it, so especially in an amp like an AC30, which is known for its chime and bell-like top end, I wouldn't go with the Ruby unless you're cranking it up for the thick, creamy Brian May thing all the time. But yes, the gold or the blue I would personally pair with the Fane A60. Mark Flemmer. Joe, how would you contrast this Mark II with the Williams Audio? I hope that's not too loaded of a question. So without speaking ill of either, I guess, I know you're a big fan of Nick's stuff. I am a big fan of Nick's stuff. And this is moving on to a few videos I did with Highlight Electronics at the start of May. I did a video with their 3 new fuzz pedals, a Mark I, a Mark II tone bender, and the Gen X fuzz, which is a little bit different. And yes, the Mark I and the Mark II, comparing it to Nick Williams's pedals, I think the overall, with both the Mark I and the Mark II, comparing both to Nick's pedals, the Highlight ones are a little bit more kind of buzzy and raspy in the kind of upper mid-range. Nick's weren't really like that. But the Highlight pedals, with the guitar's volume on 10, both of them, when you dug into the guitar, it had that really compressed, saggy low end thing going on. So you really needed to kind of turn the guitar's volume down to 9 or maybe 8.5 in order to stop that happening. Nick's pedals, they do that a little bit, but it's nowhere near as extreme as the Highlights. So both have their charms, both sound fantastic, but I think that kind of buzzy upper mid-range with the Highlights compared to Nick's, and also that kind of saggy low end, those are the 2 major differences between them. Both great pedals, and yeah, you would not be upset if you had either of them on your pedal board. But yeah, those are what I would say are the 2 fundamental differences between the 2 manufacturers. Dr. Claw 78. Bill's pickups make it sound like an already mastered guitar. Don's more like a primitive telly, pluses and minuses to both. Not sure I can say what's better, but I put Klein broadcasters in my telly, so you can guess I assume a more primitive guitar. And this is comparing the Bill Lawrence microcoils to the Donmere Hot Bakelites, which finally arrived after a year of waiting for them. And it was really interesting looking at the comments in that comparison, because it was a fairly even 50-50 split between people preferring the microcoils and people preferring the Donmeres, and they were very close overall. I think we've got another comment here from General Reviewer. Nice one, Joe. I could hear you getting what you wanted from Don's pickups, less biting treble. But for me, from here anyway, I preferred the Bill Lawrence coils. I like extra heat and snarl, particularly in a telly. And yes, the microcoils had more of that sort of on the top end and a much thicker low end, which, depending on your personal preferences, might be exactly what you want. Some people find a traditional telly to be a bit too kind of snarly in the mids and not thick enough compared to a humbucker. So in that instance, the Bill Lawrence pickups might be exactly what you wanted. So yeah, we've got another comment here from Ben Johnson along a similar line. I prefer the Donmeres. When I watched a video about the Donmere pickups, I wasn't blown away or anything. In this video, however, I can hear that the Lawrence pickups don't sound as good as the Mare pickups to my ear. You've proven many times that brighter is not always better, but clarity and good tone is what's better. Good show, mate. Just goes to show it's entirely personal preference. I think the Donmere pickups do have more of that kind of traditional vintage Blackguard telly tone. The Bill Lawrence microcoils, especially for the price, which is about a quarter of the Donmeres, can get you 90% of the way there, and might even be more to your tastes if you want more low end, more high end, with less of that kind of overly pronounced mid-range snap. So 2 amazing sets of pickups, one far more available than the other, and that one happens to be far cheaper than the other as well. But you, again, like the Highlight fuzz pedals compared to the Williams Audio, you would not be upset with either in your guitar. Michael Pridis. I'm about to install creamery toasters. Should I just keep the 330k pot arrangement if it's just as bright, if not brighter, than the 250k/500k arrangement? I'm not doing the inline capacitor thing either way. So this is getting into wiring a Rickenbacker. It's a series I did last summer, I think. And one of the things I did was change the stock modern Rickenbacker wiring, which uses 330k pots all round, to the vintage correct, what was it? It was the 250k log pots in the volumes and 500k linear pots in the tones, I think. And I compared the two to see how they sounded. And in that video, I was genuinely expecting the vintage wiring to sound much brighter and more open than the 330Ks. But they sounded pretty much exactly the same. And as Michael alludes to, the 330Ks, if anything, sounded a touch brighter than the vintage spec electronics. So if you're not fussed about having everything vintage correct like I am, then I really wouldn't worry about changing your pots whatsoever. I think a lot, or the vast majority of the tonal changes we heard in that entire series were from going from the high gain pickups to the toasters. The toasters do make a massive difference to how the Rickenbacker sounds. High gains sound more like a sort of hot telly. The toasters are definitely that kind of old 60s chimey, scoopy, Beatlesy birds thing. So that's where the big change is. But if you're not fussed about keeping everything super accurate, just leave the pots well alone. The 330Ks sound absolutely fine. Enrico Palazzo again. I loved the original view of the head, but I love even more this combo version. It is true that the cabinet makes all the difference. This was another video I did with Highlight Electronics. This was the custom SD 1x12 combo amp. And electronically, it's exactly the same as the custom SD head I demoed at the very start of last year. But as Enrico alludes to, the cabinet and the speaker choice that you run any amp circuit into does have a massive bearing on the sound, especially in the room, but also if you're just miking it up, you will definitely get more of the character of the amplifier cabinet too. And yeah, I would agree. I think the open-backed small 1x12 combo sounded much better than the cab I was running the head into last year. I can't remember exactly what. I think it was probably my Zilla Fat Boy cabinet. It was a big, deep, sort of thick-sounding cab. No idea what speakers I used. Probably the Fane F70 and A60, I'm guessing. This combo had the F70 ceramic alone in it. But yeah, I much preferred the combo to the head running into my Zilla cab. It just worked. It kept the low end tight, it kept the mid-range punchy, it had the top end detailed. Everything about that amp was really, really great. I was very sad to send that amp back. Gerald Henriksen. Wow, very nice. A real toe tapper. Edit. I ended up watching it twice more. Only twice? God, I need the revenue, mate. Keep streaming. This is a song I put out with all the highlight gear I had, called its very unimaginatively highlight reel. And yeah, I was really happy with how that song sounded. I used the highlight combo amp for all the guitar parts, and then used all three of the highlight fuzz pedals, as well as the highlight octave fuzzer, which is from the Gary Hurst series that I've had for a year or so now as well. So it was kind of entirely highlight products on that entire song. And yeah, I was really happy with how that one came out. Did like a 6-part Mark I tone bender harmony at the start, a lot of sort of dumb classic rock riffs, and then kind of went really kind of thick and fuzzy and musy halfway through. But yeah, a lot of fun putting that song together, and all the highlight gear sounded amazing. So definitely check that one out if you haven't already. Keep streaming it. As I said, I could use the cash. Bill Gaber. Thanks, Joe. That's a real Perky tune. Thank you, Bill. So the bass went through the same amplification. Did you change the mic or placement? Now, I didn't actually run the bass through the amplifier, but I did split the signal and use a highlight product in the process. So the main bulk of the bass sound is just my old 70s Hondo bass with the Monty's P-bass pickups in, going straight into a Neve-style preamp with some compression on there and a bit of EQ probably. But I did split the bass sound before that, and I ran one side of it through, I think it was the Mark II tone bender. So I had two bass tracks, one sort of clean, punchy, traditional DI, and one super nasally fuzz sound, and I blended the two together. So throughout the song, you're having a clean bass blended with a fuzz bass, which is a lot of fun to do. Very common in the recording world to have like a duplicate bass track and smash the hell out of one of them and blend them together. So you have the explosive, compressed, distorted sound blended with the punchy, dynamic, clean sound. So yeah, that's kind of what I did. You can really hear it in probably about, I don't know, 40 seconds into the song. There's a sort of solo, sort of dumb rock guitar part, and then the bass comes in just doing stabs, and I really rode the fuzz up in that section, so you can really hear the fuzz sort of loud and clear at that point. So yeah, it didn't go through the amp, it was just the DI, but I did have a highlight fuzz running simultaneously. And the final question this month from Midgot, or Midgo, if you're French perhaps. Really, really thank you. I'm a lefty, and now I finally understand why my pots just work on the range from 3 to 0. I've been searching why this happens for a long time till I get to your video because I thought something was wrong with my pots. No, nothing's wrong with your pots, it's just some guitar companies don't understand how to wire them. It's a real bane of my life that some guitar companies, Gibson for example, tend to use standard pots that they would use in any of their guitars, and they wire them in a conventional way. So for us left-handed guitarists, the pot still works with the correct taper, you just have to turn it the opposite way around relative to the guitar body than a right-handed player would. So the direction of travel is still the same, but for full volume, most people would pull it towards the heel of the guitar. For us, we have to kind of push it towards the neck. It's just backwards because the guitar's backwards but the pot's the same. But other guitar companies, I think Fender quite often do this, they won't use left-handed taper pots. They'll use the same standard pots, they'll just wire them in reverse. So the direction of travel relative to the body of the guitar is correct. You pull the pot towards the heel of the guitar for full volume, but the taper's backwards. So on the tone pot especially, nothing happens, boom, and it's really muffled. It kind of works like an on-off switch because you have that kind of logarithmic taper, but it's the wrong way around. So you get nothing, a little bit, and you just get that massive spike at the end, which is the absolute opposite of what you want. So being a left-handed guitarist certainly has its pitfalls. But for me, I use standard pots, wired conventionally, and I've just gotten used to using them backwards relative to the body of the guitar in all of my guitars. So I can use any pot in any guitar, and yes, it's technically backwards, but it's second nature to me. I'm just gotten used to it. So I would very much recommend doing that if you don't want to have to replace all your pots in most guitars you ever buy with left-handed specific pots. It's really, really annoying. So there we are, folks. I promised you a slightly shorter Q&A this month. I think we're about 10 minutes down on what we would usually be. But I'm hoping to get a good few videos out in June. Life's been insanely busy these last few months. Very difficult, as we alluded to at the start of the video, but I'm slowly starting to claw my way out of the other side of that. As I said, very much baby steps. I'm not out of the woods yet. There's a lot of rubbish going on in my life, but hopefully some more videos coming in June. And we've got some really interesting things. So this was sent over to me by Jim Hageman in Hawaii. This is his new Czar boost. So I'm looking forward to demoing this at some point. I've just this morning received some new pickups through the post. These are from a fairly new pickup manufacturer here in the UK called Northern Pickups, based up in Huddersfield in the north of England. And these are some of their T-top replicas. I've never even explored T-top style pickups before, so I'm looking forward to putting those into a guitar probably in about 10 minutes time after I finish editing this video. And yeah, there's a new amplifier sat over there, which I haven't shown you yet. I did put a little teaser up and people were guessing what it was. Somebody got it bang on the nose, which I was very impressed by. I'm thinking, having spoken to the chap that built it, he suggested a few fairly easy mods, not for me, but for an amp tech, that might actually make it more to my personal taste. So I'm thinking I might have those mods done. That could be a whole video in itself. But yeah, watch this space on that front. I might put the video of that amp together before it's modded, if it's modded. But yeah, lots of stuff that's kind of piling up. I just need to find the time to get through the workload. But fingers crossed in June, I should have a little bit more time. So there we are, folks. Thank you for watching. I really enjoy doing these Q&A videos, and yeah, slightly shorter today, but I didn't want to leave you without one this month. So any more questions, use the hashtag and I'll get to them either in the comment section, next month's Q&A, or both. So thanks for watching, folks, and I will see you very, very soon. Bye-bye.